It's Sunday, October 1, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is infamous for her analysis of Fox News. I say news in quotes there. As we know, it's more of an opinion and entertainment channel, but she does the hard work so we don't have to watch it. From Decoding Fox News, Juliet Jeske, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thanks for having me.
So, you know I don't envy your job. A lot of people don't, because Fox is quite a hard channel to watch, and we know that there was a kind of divestment of ownership recently. Rupert Murdoch has kind of handed his ownership to his son Lachlan, who I've heard is more right-wing than his father. Which, do you think that could change the editorial direction of Fox News?
They don't so far. I think it's probably going to stay close to where it's at. I think the difference is everything I've read about Rupert versus his son is Rupert was more disciplined and his son is a little bit more unpredictable and not as, I mean, it kind of makes sense because Rupert Murdoch built it up from nothing and his son just sort of inherited it. And apparently his son is not as disciplined or as careful as his father. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
It's always interesting to think about the kind of influence that comes from the top. And if you were to watch Succession, or The Morning Show has a new season on Apple TV Plus, which I'm a huge fan of that show, it really does kind of show the way that the media operates. How much influence do you think that the news anchors take from the family, or do you think that they just, the company just employs people who are as extreme as they can find and let them just get on with their work of spreading propaganda?
Well, from what I know, it's a little of both. The primetime shows have more autonomy. They're allowed to kind of do what they want within a range. The Five and Fox and Friends, which are the other two shows I focus on, are more controlled by management. Especially Fox and Friends, apparently, is very tightly controlled. They act like it's just off the cuff and they're making little statements, but apparently that's not the case. The management's very on top of them, and they definitely want the content as they want the content. They don't like them to go rogue or go off cuff or anything like that. But yeah, I definitely think like Sean Hannity is a true believer. Laura Ingraham is a true believer, 100%. Jesse Waters, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I think he's been there. It's been his only job. He's only worked for Fox News.
And he's the rising star, really, isn't he? And I do think it's interesting how Fox kind of like people who are, authentic and natural. That really is the key to getting on in the TV business, to be authentic and natural. But he's also institutionalized. So his authenticity, as I read it, is pure Fox through and through. Like he has never operated outside of that world.
Yes, it's kind of amazing to watch because he basically got an internship there when he was really young, and he never had any other job. He just slowly worked his way up, and he's not nearly as bright as Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham was a Supreme Court justice. She was a Supreme Court justice clerk, I should say. And Hannity is very bright, even though I may not agree with anything he says. He's not stupid. And Waters just seems like a naive, kind of befuddled, like he just believes it because he doesn't know any better. And will spout out, he will read something on a goofy website and do no background research and just say it immediately that night. And it's just astounding.
And the misogyny with him is a repeat thing, isn't it? I mean, he clearly has a very odd relationship with women.
Yes, because he's had his mother on his show more than once.
And she's a Democrat, all right?
Yes.
Or she's anti-Trump, so she's always putting him straight.
Yeah, his mother is a type of person who calls him like honey bun, and she's like overly kind of maybe too supportive of him, and that she's like blindly like, you're amazing and I love you, and you're like, what? And which I get. I mean, it's her son, but she's very supportive of him, and it's very odd because he seems very attached to her, Like he wants to know her opinion. He gets nervous when she talks.
He's like a mummy's boy.
He's a mummy's boy, and yet he trashes women constantly. So it's and he cheated on his first wife with an intern who was 14 years younger, and like blatantly cheated on his wife. Apparently, they didn't really hide that. And now he's with wife number 2, and he said kind of mean things about wife number 2 on the show. It constantly trashes his co-workers and says horrible things about women all the time. And I just sit there going, this is just so bizarre to watch. A mommy's boy.
Well, it's not journalism. I mean, that's really the thing that you get from people like him becoming a kind of star of Fox, is that it is not journalism. These people are not journalists. It is angry, bigoted, misogynistic commentary. And I think, I'm hoping that people even on the right are starting to realize, just by nature of the kind of the blind worship of any kind of right-wing, far-right or extremist policies. So the reason that we're talking today is because, it's been a very crazy week. We're on the verge of a government shutdown. Mm-hmm. We had the death of Dianne Feinstein just a couple of days ago at the age of 90. Came as no surprise to anybody, but still she's devoted her life, in San Francisco. She's been heavily involved in bringing about gun control legislation, various things. So we'll maybe come to her a little bit later. But the thing that really is most pressing is these debates that the Republicans are having. The most recent one this week was Fox News Business hosting this debate with one absent individual. Individual one, I should say. Individual one was absent. Donald Trump refusing to take part in these Republican debates. Just before we kind of get into the analysis of the debate, tell me why you think Donald Trump is choosing not to be involved.
I don't think he wants any criticism. I think he wants to remain, he knows he's so far ahead of everyone else that he doesn't have to debate, and that his fans are loyal to him. His followers don't really care what he says, because he's been caught in a number of gaffes recently. And they don't seem to react at all. Like he was talking about Obama when he meant Biden. He's kind of out to lunch himself. But I think he just doesn't want extra criticism. He wants to remain on top. He wants to remain untouched. He feels he's above it. He doesn't need to sully himself with debates where he would obviously, at least Chris Christie would attack him relentlessly. Chris Christie's actually very good at that. I'm not a huge fan of Chris Christie as a politician. Yeah. He's very skilled at attacking Trump.
Well, he trains Donald Trump for the first set of debates. He was effectively a coach and media trainer for him in 2016. This
is true. Yes. And he's very skilled at it. You can tell he knows what he's doing as far as debate is concerned. But I think Trump feels like he's above it. He doesn't need it, so he's not going to bother.
So my theory on the reason why Donald Trump doesn't want to be involved is it's twofold. I kind of agree with you that he's so far ahead in the polls that he doesn't need to sully himself with that kind of hot mess, because both of these debates have been car crash events, and to the extent that they're unwatchable, mm-hmm. and it proves that these people are not serious. They're not serious politicians. They're not serious people. Many of them, like Vivek Ramaswamy, are performative. They don't care about kind of civic duty or societal responsibility or leadership. It's about power. It's about money. It's about just growing the kind of ego. He mm-hmm. clearly is himself a bit of a narcissist, and so. So the cast of characters is so depressing. Of course, there's only one female there, which is Nikki Haley. And she got so angry in the Fox business debate. Just, we saw another side to her, I think. She was just done with these men. She's like, get me out of here. But I think that Donald Trump deep down knows that actually he doesn't have the knowledge to debate. On his rally stages, it's just him. And he can say whatever he wants, whether it's talking about whales being killed by windmills or any of the kind of the eccentric and chaotic language that he comes up with. And he can go off on tangents and he can make mess because he's on stage for an hour and a half or 2 hours and he doesn't care. It's his show. I think this is about ego and sharing the stage. He wants to be the star. He doesn't know anything about policy. When we see him make these policy videos in Mar-a-Lago with this kind of weird Stalinistic background, he's just reading it. And it's not words that he's written. This is, Stephen Miller or people who've written this stuff for him. So you can tell that he's reading it for the first time because his ego is such that he won't pre-read this policy, he won't discuss it. When he's talking about segregating cities, or arresting the homeless and putting them in what I translated to be internment camps. It's like, if you were to read that policy, you'd be like, I think you're describing internment camps. But of course he doesn't read. So he wouldn't be able to engage with them on policy because he doesn't know anything. He just knows those kind of headlines that we built the wall and, we did this, we did that, but no detail. And obviously some of the others up there are a little more well-versed on this, including those who were blaming him, like Ron DeSantis, for adding $7 trillion to the national debt. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't want to be involved in that conversation, does he?
No, and he lies about it. When he was on Meet the Press, he said, I cut taxes and revenue went up. And I'm like, no, it didn't. Yeah. Absolutely did not. That is complete fiction. And his camp, his people are trying to spin it as, well, it went up to 7 trillion because the
pandemic, they say.
The pandemic, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, it was a reckless, you cut taxes too much on the very, very wealthy, and they make a lot more than everyone else. And so when their taxes get cut dramatically, tax revenue plummets, and that's what happened. And anything you read about it will say over and over, it was his tax cuts that is part of the reason why our deficit is so out of control and our debt is so out of control right now. It's not spending, it's the tax cuts, but he just lies. I don't think he even knows. I don't think if you asked him, he doesn't know, he doesn't care. He's just off on his own planet. He just wants to go to rallies and have people say USA and cheer and wear MAGA hats and, worship him, basically. That's all he really, that and staying out of prison. That's about all he cares about.
That's the only reason he's running for president is to stay out of prison, right? I mean, he's obviously not really in a place mentally or physically to be the president. And people say, he hasn't really aged like Joe Biden. And I really do see Trump's aging. I do think that this has taken a toll on him. And, I'm a little bit obsessed with hair because I don't have any. But I'm looking at the comb over and I'm seeing that now it's just become a bird's nest, like a fluffy bird's nest at the front. Gone is that kind of the directional parting. And whilst that might not mean anything to anybody, to me, to baldmen like myself, it actually, we can tell, because I'm obviously not a vain person, I've never really cared about that. But to people who are vain like him, that is going to upset him and frustrate him that he can't brush his hair, as he has been for the last 20, 30 years. And that there is change there. And we saw it with Barack Obama. He went from dark hair to grey hair during his presidency. But that's because he actually was the president and did presidenting, I guess. It is taking a toll on Donald Trump. He now needs 3 hands to drink a glass of water.
Basically. I mean, I've definitely seen it. Others have seen it. They've done compilations where they've put together like recent gaffes where he's just saying things that aren't true, or he's not sure where he is. He said things like, we know I was in the White House last week, and people are like, no, you weren't. What are you talking about? Yeah. So he's definitely not, the spry young man that they try to pretend that he is. He's also pretty old, and he showed signs of cognitive decline when he was in the White House, in my opinion. And I'm not the only, that's why they wanted to give him a test about it. And then he bragged about the test, and the test was like ridiculously stupid. The woman, man, TV, whatever it was. I don't remember that exact order, but it was like, I wouldn't be bragging about that test. It's like kind of goof. He's just, we're in a bad place with that man. He scares the heck out of me. It's like I laugh at him, and then I'm like, nope, he could be president again.
And that is the serious threat here, isn't it? It's I know it's amusing to talk about Fox as entertainment, But the reality is that has been spreading propaganda for 2 or 3 decades to the point that it has pushed the country further and further to the right. And, I never really know whether they're supporting Donald Trump at the moment or not. It's hard
they've
to
been
tell.
a little odd.
One week to the next, they kind of their allegiance seems to change based upon his. He's like a kind of volatile stock, isn't he?
Yes.
if he's on top, then they'll support him. But if there's a chance that he might lose because he screwed up that week, then they kind of drop him like a stone. I would just say, going back to the debate, that the biggest issue here is that whilst these 8 candidates on the... Was it 8 or 12?
7.
No, 8. 7. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst they might not seem necessary in this whole thing because they're so far behind in the polls, that is fine, provided Donald Trump doesn't get prosecuted and prevented from running for president. Mm-hmm. And with 91 charges and 4 indictments, there's a good chance that one of them might stick. And so then we are going to have to look to Nikki Haley or to Mike Pence or to Vivek Ramaswamy or Tim Scott or any of this gallery of curios. So do you think that that's the reason why they're still fighting? Because actually they're all hoping, I know Ron DeSantis is, because this has always been his plan, is in the hope that Trump goes down and then they have to step up.
I think that's part of it. I think the debate this week was the first time I saw Ron DeSantis actually make a direct stab towards Trump, like direct. And it was immediate and it was quick. And it was at the very top of his statement. And I was kind of shocked. And I was like, finally, you should have been doing this months ago, because he's been playing this kind of passive, like, I don't want to, make him mad because I still want his followers. But I'm still going to act like he was just sort of ignoring Trump's many attacks. And it didn't work. It didn't work at all. He just got more and more diminished. And he's also very awkward and odd. And he comes across as awkward and odd. And I think the people who were really promoting him didn't realize that he was kind of an odd man. But I think that's what he's hoping is he's like, I'm the reasonable one. I mean, I don't think he is, but I think he views himself as that. Yeah. He also keeps pushing, I have the results. Look at Florida. And I'm like, actually, most of the country kind of makes fun of Florida. You know that. But I mean, I don't want to diss Florida, but I have many friends in Florida.
It is difficult to live in Florida at the moment.
Yeah.
The cost of insurance, rent is very high. Cost of living generally is a big problem. Not to mention the fact that they have Nazi rallies semi-regularly now, and no one seems to bat an eyelid like that. Oh yeah, that's normal. There's a whole bunch of people doing Heil Hitler on the freeway. I mean, and also they've changed the laws on guns recently on permitless carry. So it is not unless you live in the villages. With all the white people, I don't know that necessarily it is the greatest place, the great state of Florida as he describes. Yeah,
I mean, it is what they also have a high rate of uninsured people.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have health insurance there. And he got called out on that during the debate, and he didn't really have an answer to it. He had some non-answer about, we need to put patients first or something. It made no sense. And he talked about oil. He literally talked about oil in his response. We need to drill and open up the economy. And I'm like, what are you talking? They asked you about insurance, but Florida's, it's always been kind of an odd state because it used to be more purple. It's gone far more red. And it's always attracted older Americans from the North and also has its own unique culture that's very, very Florida. It's kind of like 3 different states, depending on what part of the state you're at. So high rates of homelessness, high rates of crime in most of the cities. So it's not really this place to brag about. I mean, I don't want to diss Florida. I have a lot of friends that live there. They're good people all over this country. But it's odd that he's like, look at my gorgeous, perfect state. I'm like, I don't know if the rest of the country sees it that way.
And he also manipulated the data on COVID in Florida to make it look like it wasn't as bad as it was.
Yeah.
But actually it was actually one of the worst states for COVID deaths. And, I would say that I really do feel that Ron DeSantis will end up just going back to Florida and being the governor there and arresting black people for voting as he has been, before he got on the road as a presidential candidate. And I say that with a huge amount of sadness and irony, incidentally, because, that was the story for me out of Florida that was the most upsetting. was, people that had criminal records in the past who'd been told that they could vote. But of course, he changed the rules on that at the 11th hour. They didn't know. They go to vote, and then the next thing you know, his task force is arresting them. And so much of this we've seen on camera. And really, very sweet, regular people being handcuffed and being like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And even the police officers were saying, I'm sorry, I have to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, that is authoritarianism. That is totalitarianism. That is fascism. And to think that Ron DeSantis is not a fascist is foolish, considering his relationship with the Nazis and the far right.
Well, and the way he acts, too, when he's confronted or he has to deal with conflict, he acts in a very kind of fascist way. It's like, my way or the highway, shut up. Yeah. The way he's treated Disney, his relationship with anybody who questions his policies on LGBTQ issues in schools. He's got a very, it's like he wants to be a dictator. The way he acts with everyone is just very, how dare you question me? Tries to shut everybody down. He fired district attorneys who he didn't agree with that. They were freely elected. I mean, that is outrageous. Yeah. But he fired freely elected district attorneys. But
that was only in the news for like 3 days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why is it that these fascism flags that keep popping up, like Trump the other day talking about executing Mark Milley or shutting down NBC or any of these, fascist tropes, they don't seem to stay in the news cycle very long, and they get completely ignored by Fox News, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So Fox viewers have absolutely no idea that this type of rhetoric is being spun, because even people on the right should be appalled to know that duly elected people are being fired.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. I found out about one of them because Tucker, this was when Tucker was still on the air. And I didn't know the man was Jewish. This was dark. The DA had gotten fired. Tucker Carlson, at one point during COVID, the DA had made a statement about do unto others as you would do unto you. He was like quoting the Bible. And Tucker made a comment that made me go, why? That's odd language that you're using. And that Tucker said, oh, it's disgusting that he says those words. It's disgusting that he says those words. And I'm like, why would it be disgusting? So I Googled and I kept looking and I'm like, oh, that's dark. Because the man's Jewish, because that's what I read from it, that Tucker was angry that a Jewish person would quote the Bible, because it didn't make sense. His reaction did not make sense. And I went, that's really disgusting and sick. And Tucker had numerous anti-Semitic flare-ups like that were subtle, but if you were looking a little bit deeper, you would catch what he was doing. And it was nobody cared. I mean, and that was the only mention of that one on Fox is Tucker Carlson, like almost glorifying the fact that the man was fired. He was excited about it. And again, disgusted that this man would quote the Bible. And I was very deeply disturbed by that. But Tucker Carlson was, thankfully right now he's on Twitter doing his own thing and kind of barely, I don't know if anyone's paying attention to him, but we'll see what happens.
He could step in as a presidential candidate. I mean, this is, some people are saying that.
Yeah.
That, the problem with not having a well-paid job, I mean, I'm sure that he's still making plenty of money and I'm sure his deal with Elon Musk is significant. But the problem with having time on your hands is that you do start sniffing around for things. And, he thinks Donald Trump is an idiot, right? That's been proven time and time again with the text messages that were exposed in the Dominion case and various things. And I have no doubt that he has the ego to think that he could step up and be the Republican presidential candidate, because the 7 on that stage clearly are
they don't have it.
Total disagreement about anything. Mm-hmm. And the problem with Tucker Carlson and people like him is that they are very good at communication. Mm-hmm. And as much as I hate to credit people like that, and I used to train politicians for speeches in the UK. That was one of my side hustles. And he doesn't need any help. He really knows how to get the message across. And that is dangerous.
Yeah. He was a very dangerous person. When he was on Fox, every time anybody asked me who's the worst person on Fox, without hesitation, I'd say Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
without hesitation, because he also spreads conspiracy theories and racism and white supremacy, and it's definitely anti-Semitism that flared up more than once on his show. And I was horribly disgusted by him all the time. He taps into, I'm actually going through all of his old Tucker Carlson Today episodes meticulously, like a crazy person, but I like doing this.
You're amazing.
I like doing this kind of research because you can understand them inside and out.
Yeah.
And he has 262 episodes, and I'm literally going through them, making notes. I have a whole spreadsheet and turning everything into transcripts. And the thing that I pick up is there's like a deep resentment in him towards the changing demographics in the United States. He wants to go back to this like mythical 1950s. Hence
his kind of white replacement theory kind of concept that he keeps going back to. Like he used to do it as specials, didn't he? Where it would be a kind of special episode on this idea of white people being replaced.
Yes. And now that's openly talked about on Fox.
Yeah.
He started that, and now Fox hosts and guests they may not say the great replacement, but they'll say they're doing this to change the demographics of the country.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you realize how hard it is to go from undocumented immigrant to voter in this country? That's years. That could never happen. Many undocumented immigrants never get the right to vote because they never become a citizen because the process is so difficult. So this attitude that we're just importing all these people and they're all going to just immediately vote like Democrats and change the country. It's like, I don't know what you're talking, because I mean, a Venezuelan's going to vote very differently than a Mexican, than a Cuban, than
But it's just pure racism, Juliet, isn't it? I mean, and we have so many conversations about this on this show and elsewhere. And unfortunately, so much of it can be traced back to racism as the kind of core, the kind of nucleus of their policy making and their thinking. It all goes back to kind of Jim Crow era attitudes, and how they never wanted to come out of that. They wanted segregation. They wanted public lynchings. Mm-hmm. And I was actually reading through some of the kind of Jim Crow etiquette, as it was called. I mean, it is so completely... I actually think that people now generationally have forgotten what that stuff really means, and I think instead of saying Jim Crow, we should be much more specific about segregation. I was reading about handshaking, how a black man can't reach out to shake a white man's hand. The white man has to reach out to shake it, and how a black man can't light a cigarette for a woman because that would be seen as a sexual act. So much stuff, like fine detail, that I was researching, and I was like, we need to be talking more about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because, generationally, I think people have forgotten how black and brown people have had a been treated completely differently by America as a country over the years. Listen, we have to take a little pause for our sponsor, but I'd like to come back and talk more with Juliet Jeske here on The Weekend Show. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Using silver-infused fabrics originally inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WEEKEND at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend and use the code WEEKEND to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. That's trymiracle.com/weekend to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. We're back with the weekend show, and decoding Fox News' Juliet Jeske. Just tell us, because for people who might not know, and I love to kind of give you an opportunity to promote your work, because you work so hard, and it is something that is it's thankless, isn't it? When people don't know. For those of us who kind of edit videos and upload and spend time, it's quite a solitary job. And it requires you to have an incredible, like a Rolodex in your brain of like things that you've seen that you can connect a clip of that to something like this and reference this and that. So just tell us, for those who don't know, how Decoding Fox News came about and your mission, effectively.
Well, I started off sort of accidentally researching the Proud Boys before anybody really knew who they were. And it's a long story how I got into that. And I ended up amassing 407 episodes of the Gavin McInnes show. That was the show that they started on. Yeah. And so I had this weird background, and I'd worked with a bunch of journalists, and I was anonymous, just a researcher. Went to grad school, decided I still wanted to work in that genre, I guess, or that beat, I should say, that beat. And so for my capstone, I did a similar project to what I'm doing now, only Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, who's like this horrible, basically a Nazi.
Yeah,
and then
a guest at Mar-a-Lago one time.
Yes, and he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago. This is true. And then One American News Network, and then I compared that to nonpartisan media. And then I turned that in when I graduated in 2021 in December. And Jeff Jarvis, who helped found my school, he's well known in media. He founded Entertainment Weekly. He basically read it and within 24 hours offered me a grant. This is very rare what happened to me. Most people don't get an MA and get a grant. And then I started Decoding Fox News February 2022 because he just said, will you do what you did in your capstone, but do it about Fox? And I said, sure. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I designed the project, and I designed it it's a lot of media to watch. And then when something crazy happens, I usually pick that up too. So my weeks can be very intense. And it's a lot of, I didn't realize until I did it that consuming right-wing media is considered a skill, and that a lot of people can't do it and won't do it and don't want to do it. And I can handle it. So that's how I got into it. But yeah, it is very challenging. It's very challenging.
Let's explain to people who don't quite understand, because, if you've grown up in the US after the 80s, when Reagan and Donald Rumsfeld, I think it was, removed the fairness doctrine, and this, prevented this balance in reporting. And now we have this thing called both sides reporting. And I've never really understood what that is, because it's not journalism. It's basically channels like the mainstream legacy networks, CBS, ABC, NBC, who feel compelled to both sides something. This is what the Republicans say, and this is what the Democrats say, and, you go away and work it out. And I've spoken to so many people who, when I say, well, what news networks do you watch? They're like, oh, well, I watch a bit of Fox and a bit of NBC, and then between it, I can kind of work out what is true. And I'm like, that's not a way to consume the news, because one of them is completely untrue. And that's not me being partisan. That is just journalistic. From a journalistic perspective, you just tell the facts. And people have it's called like projecting. They project their positive bias. Yeah. So if you were to cover a story that was about Donald Trump and his, infidelity, let's say, they'd be like, that is biased, that is liberal. And it's like, it's a story. It's a true story. And so that kind of editorial decision to leave stuff out, which is what Fox does, and to only focus on stuff that is going to grow audience and get people riled up and angry and make them think that Democrats are extreme and terrible, and we're going to take away guns and take away your rights, make you wear a mask, all this rhetoric. The danger there is that it makes the viewers very angry, very hateful, and the division that we are struggling with in this country to the point that they can't decide, on the debt and government shutdown, like things that there should be consensus over, is now never going to happen because channels like Fox and One America and Newsmax and all of these channels are basically brainwashing people. It's dangerous, and maybe it's what America deserves, because it hasn't happened. Well, who would you say is responsible, and do you think that we as viewers need to do more work and not just sit there like couch potatoes and consume this garbage?
I think it's partly, and I don't mean to diss it, but I'm going to have to. I think cable news is part of the problem. The idea of 24-hour news channels is problematic because it's all you want to keep eyeballs on your screen, and so that causes a push to sensationalism, and it causes a push to kind of stories that really aren't important but will get people watching, celebrity nonsense, and just that kind of garbage news that's out there.
It's like clickbait, isn't it?
Clickbait, yeah. And that's part of it. Not to say that all cable news is terrible. It's just that, unfortunately, when you're trying to keep up with that kind of constant obsession with ratings and income and all that, it brings out kind of the worst in news. So that's part of it. And then I also think that Rupert Murdoch is a huge part of the problem, because he came, he's Australian, of course, but when he built his media empire and he broke into the United States market, his attitude was, I'm going to build this machine and it will be Fox News and I will influence politics with it. And he was successful. And insofar that when you watch the network, it is a constant rage spiral, paranoia, fear, and they just push the same 5 stories over and over and over again the whole day, whatever it is. They'll show a 30-second crime clip and on a loop. You watch it, they'll have part of the screen that's just dedicated to, they'll have 2 people, and then the third part of the screen, the third panel will be whatever crime clip it is. And
they did that with BLM riots, didn't
they?
With the fires, the burning of the shops and things. They just kept looping those.
Kept looping it. And what's amazing about it is I was talking about it when I was just in Texas. I was in Austin, and for the Texas Tribune Festival. And I said, one of the things that's very strange about it is they'll show something that really should be a local story, like it'll be a subway crime, which anywhere else out of New York City is, people don't have subways. They don't really, they do sort of in some cities, but they don't have this vast network of a subway system that New York has. So they just don't have the same type of situation. And that Fox acts like it's the most important story in the country, and they'll dedicate a crazy amount of time to it. And they're like, let's go back to the tape. And I'm like, let's not. It's just this, it's unfortunate that this happened, but there are bigger stories happening all over the world that you're not covering.
But they know, don't they? The hosts know that they are forcing a diet, an unhealthy diet. It's like just eating fast food and never touching a vegetable. Yeah. And this is so dangerous for humanity, because part of the problem is that Russia will take clips of Tucker Carlson's show as it was and broadcast it on state television, state news TV in Russia, and claim that that is America's view, that America is on the side of Putin, and that they don't want the war in Ukraine, and all this stuff. And so it helps our adversaries.
Yeah. And it's really bad too, because sometimes they're so petty, they'll go after anything. I'm working on a montage for my newsletter podcast for next week, which is just about Biden tripping. Yeah. And so they got some inside information that Biden is meeting with a physical therapist and has better shoes, and they're trying to work on him not tripping. Now, he did break his foot, and he is an older man, so he has an odd gait, and that could be any of us. If we broke our foot, we could be stuck with an odd gait and be a little unsteady. That's normal. But Fox blew it up, and they're like, they dedicated an insane amount of airtime to this story that was not a story. And then they were like, look, he fell again. And I'm like, he did not fall. And it was just him walking downstairs and just ever so slightly sort of didn't trip, didn't fall. But they're like, see? And they just kept showing it. And then they start showing past trips and then past falls. And then, oh, look, he fell off his bike again. I'm like, you've shown that like hundreds of times. And it's something like that petty and that stupid, they'll turn into a major story on the network because they know it, since they've already worked up their audience to believe that this man is in cognitive decline and that he's falling apart. It's like a sporting event. Like, let's watch that replay again and get people all worked up. And
it's so inhumane. Like it lacks all humanity and any sense of kindness and desire to, I mean, how have we got to the point where humanity has been pushed aside in favor of propaganda and politics? It's such a shame because, nobody benefits. I say this all the time on the show, like nobody benefits. Some people just get angry, their blood pressure goes up, they spend more time at Kaiser Permanente as a result of it. I really do feel that. I almost feel like the healthcare companies are in cahoots with the news. It's like, get the blood pressure up, get people eating the wrong food. It's almost like profit is what is the most powerful entity at every level, whether it be in the news that we consume or the hospitals that we go to. It's all for profit. And profit really has prevented the country from having a kind of genuine and respectful political discourse because there is money to be made.
Yeah. And there's like a ruthlessness that is underneath the surface of that is very much a part of the Fox kind of philosophy of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, survival of the fittest, and this kind of nastiness. And because you say healthcare, and that's the first thing I thought of. It's just like, oh, you can't get healthcare. Well, figure that out. That's kind of the conservative way attitude towards it. And it's very unhealthy, very unhealthy. I hear constantly from people. People will email me or they'll make a comment on something and they'll say, my mother doesn't talk to me anymore because she watches Fox News all day long and she's angry all day long. And, or my parents, they fight over Fox News, or I don't talk to my brother because of Fox News. And it's absolutely tragic. And it's like, why? You're just watching these, basically clowns I'll call them that, sitting behind a desk in a little suit, saying the same nonsense every single day.
It's like the Truman Show, isn't it? It's like a fake version of America. Because in the meantime, the country has done very well to get back on its feet after COVID. The infrastructure bill has helped in untold amounts with these new projects and with broadband and the CHIPS Act, and there's a lot to be very proud of at the moment. And Biden, to all intents and purposes, no matter what shoe he is wearing, has played an excellent game as president. Some people say he is the most effectual president in history for what he's been able to do and turn around in this period. He is a serious person. We want serious people, and we want it to be boring. Because I don't want an entertainer to be the president. I want the president to be a nerd. I want them to be a kind of numbers person or somebody who just is obsessed with detail. Yeah. That's politics should be boring.
I completely agree. We've got plenty of drama in our lives. We don't need it to be. Yeah. I mean, I always find that funny, people who lean into drama, like online or whatever. I was just think, why? You don't need to. Just just wait long enough and something bad will happen. You don't need to search for it.
But maybe these people don't, I mean, I don't know. I have kids, and so, I have so much drama dealing with them and taking them to doctor's appointments and like doing stuff that I want to use up my energies for. And so that's why I don't have the time to engage on social media or do any of these things. It's like I feel that who are the people that are trolling or getting involved in this stuff? Do they have nothing else going on? Because I don't have room in my head for all of this anger and chaos and divisiveness. I really enjoy talking with conservatives. I mean, I have a show now each week, Uncovered, with Ron Filipkowski, who is a conservative, and we talk. I mean, I actually threatened to wrestle him to the ground in this week's episode just gone over his views on universal basic income. But I said it in a very nice way. And isn't this the point? Like, the ability to communicate and converse in a civil and respectful manner has been lost because Fox and similar networks have turned us into enemies.
They treat it like sports, and it's not sports. You know, They treat it like it's a game. Like, if this side believes in this, we absolutely cannot agree.
Right.
And I think COVID was a lot of that. Yeah, COVID was a lot of that, to the point that you're like, so we've found that in areas where people watch more Fox and voted for Trump, the death rate from COVID was much higher, and you still don't care. You're still doubling, tripling down on all this nonsense that you pushed during the pandemic. And then they act as if, because of, it was a new disease. We didn't know, nobody knew what it was. Nobody could understand it. It was a constantly readjust. Do this. No, do this, do this, do this.
Changing guidelines as you get more data. Yeah.
Which is the kind of nature of science.
Normal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's normal. And they turned that all into, they were lying. It was all lies. And I'm like, how is it a lie? It was a brand new disease. Nobody knew what the heck was going on. And we were constantly guessing and everybody was trying their best. And like, were there mistakes made? Of course there were. But telling people that the vaccine's not safe is lunacy. Telling people to take these snake oil cures is incredibly reckless and dangerous. And I live in New York, where we had 800 people dying a day at the peak, 800 a day. And you could feel it. I mean, the entire city was just freaked out and terrified, and it was a horrible, horrible time. And so that's why it's hard for me that still gets me mad, that they still push COVID-19 nonsense on their net. Like, they can't help themselves. They can't let it go.
Well, we're seeing a resurgence of the virus.
Yeah.
There are new vaccines out, and Republicans are just not going to take it.
Yeah.
So the only people who will be vaccinated are Democrats.
Yeah.
The same way that the only people driving electric cars will be Democrats.
Yeah.
This is what worries me. Because, I don't want Democrats to have a better life than Republicans. We're all the same, fundamentally, prick us and we shall bleed. But people are going to be left behind. People who are not getting with the program are going to be left behind. And the world is changing at such a rate. I mean, New York, where you are, just declared a state of emergency on Friday because 8 inches of rain is falling in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, the cities, they're not built for this climate change. And yet, I'd say all, maybe but Chris Christie on that debate stage, on the Fox Business debate, don't believe in climate change. They claim it's a hoax. I mean, Republicans are going to be left so far behind from the rest of the world, who are really, taking this very, very seriously.
Yeah, I made a clip last week where Brian Kilmeade said, he made a comment about, what country's going underwater right now because of climate change? What country? I'm like, Pakistan last year, 1/3. Yeah. How do you not know that story? It was huge. 1/3 of the country was underwater because of flooding. And that's not normal. It's not like, that happens every year. It's not like some areas that flood every year, but no, that was not normal. And you had millions of people displaced, and they haven't really recovered. So this attitude of, it's like when you live your life that blindly, which is what they do, or they just focus, hyper focus on these petty little issues that they want to push, and they don't pay attention to the rest of the world. That's part of the problem, because these people have no idea what's going on, that we broke every single heat record last year, that sea ice is the lowest it's ever been. That there were wildfire records broken all over the world, that there was flooding records broken all over the world, Norway, Portugal, Greece, North Africa, flooding, Canada, record level of wildfires. And and in the US, we had catastrophic climate events all over the place. And they still make excuses, and they'll say, they twist it and they just make their own reality. And they have fake experts on, like, this one, I talk about him a lot because he's like the epitome of the fake expert. But Michael Schellenberger, he has an MA in anthropology, and he calls himself a climate expert. And I'm like, that's funny. That's interesting. I wish I could do that. I could just make up I'm an expert in this. I don't have any training in it, but I'm just going to call myself an expert in something, especially a science that takes a lot of diligence. And, that's not something you just kind of.
And yet people like
know.
Anthony Fauci have been marginalized.
Yes.
And they call him the Antichrist. They really have so much vitriol for somebody who arguably has been one of modern history's greatest public servants, both through the AIDS epidemic and into Ebola, certainly, and then into COVID-19. And so that is what is so sad about this, is that it's all untrue. It's all lies. They credit the government with having skills that no government would have, developing bioweapons to, and all that. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, have you seen a government? Public service takes years for the system to churn.
Yeah.
And I just wish that people had more critical thinking and did more due diligence. Because to believe what these people say, or the problem is that they corroborate it across the network, don't they? So if it's said in the morning on one show, then in the afternoon they'll be doing the same thing. And this is all editorial guidelines that are put out by the channel editor to make sure that they're doubling down on topics to give the impression that it's true.
Oh, yeah. And that is super important. Yeah, I always make jokes about the government, too, because it's like, it can't be this secret covert operation and the post office.
That's right.
It's the post office. Like, have you been to the post office lately?
Yeah, that's basically the government. Yeah.
That's the government, because it's underfunded, overworked, and outdated.
It
and
has ceiling tiles missing. That's basically the government. Yeah.
Yes, and they're like, oh, we got to find a form. And you're like, a form? We got to go find a form. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, I think that about car registration stickers. Why are we still putting stickers that someone could peel off on our license plates? Like, is that not like the weirdest thing ever in 2023 to be using stickers? Because in every other country in Europe, there's no physical anything. It's all done through number plate recognition and technology, and it's just normal. And yet here we're still like, the red sticker, the yellow sticker, the blue sticker. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's just California, but that's how it feels.
Well, this is something that I've been told by Europeans that they just are baffled by. They're like, you still use paper checks? And I'm like, yeah. We do. And they're like, what? Why can't I just get your routing number? And I'm like, what? It's like, I got paid for a couple of things from Europe a few years ago, and it was just hilarious because they couldn't figure out how to pay me because our system was so like bank transfer. It was it was humorous.
This is the world we live in. Okay, let's take another quick pause, and then we're going to come back and talk more with Juliet Jeske here on The Weekend Show. Everyone knows how annoying cheap razors are. The cuts, the irritation, the frustration. And don't get me started with subscription razor services. The headaches those can cause. That's why you've got to meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station and Mars rover. And now they're bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. Razor blades are like diving boards. The longer the board, the more the wobble. The more wobble, the more nicks, cuts, and scrapes. A bad shave isn't a blade problem, it's an extension problem. By using aerospace-grade CNC machines, Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. That means a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. And it gets better. The razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. Seriously, Henson Shaving wants to be the best razor, not the best razor business. That means no plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 per year to replace the blades. My first shave with the Henson razor was incredibly refreshing. The design is sleek, the durability is top-notch. The Henson razor is truly so much better than your run-of-the-mill, quote-unquote, traditional razor brand. And the affordability factor is absolutely game-changing. No more wasting your money on expensive blades. With Henson Shaving, you can get a year of blades for $5.
It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/weekend to pick the razor for you and use code WEEKEND and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure you add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/weekend and use code WEEKEND.
It's the weekend show. We're back with Juliet Jeske as we've been looking back at the week. We had Joe Biden making a fourth speech about the fall of democracy and the rise of fascism. And, this is it was one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard. And I do believe that, he knows about the threat of authoritarianism. He recognizes that democracy is not a given. And unfortunately, Fox didn't cover it. They switched to other things. We also had a historic period this week when Joe Biden went to a picket line, the auto workers, and joined the auto workers on the picket line, which no president has ever done. And he spoke for a few minutes, and it was very powerful. And yet that is ignored in place of Donald Trump going to a non-unionized auto workers factory and just talking garbage, like pure garbage, knowing nothing about the industry or the situation or the whole point of even being there. And obviously that gets plenty of coverage. Let's just talk about how Fox plans to install Donald Trump into the presidency and overlook his litany of crimes. How are they managing that? And how are they presenting the notion that this career criminal is effectively running for office to save his own neck?
They have basically been very selective about what they cover. So they ignore a lot of it. And then they're trying to make it into Hunter Biden being the equivalent of Trump, which makes no sense because Hunter Biden never worked for the government. Hunter Biden, they can't prove anything that he's done yet other than the gun charge and, his terrible habits of drug use and tax problems, drug use and then, hiring sex workers. But no one's going to go after him for the sex workers or the drug use. And it's just not how it works. But they're trying to make that a false equivalency there. And it's ridiculous. And anyone who breaks it down goes, no, this is absolutely ridiculous. But they just keep insisting upon it. So they just make Hunter Biden an incredibly important story on the network. They push it every single week. Sometimes it's the top topic. Sometimes it's number 2. But it is inordinately covered. And then they'll just talk about Trump, but they do it in a very selective way. They don't talk about the criminal charges he's facing. Often they don't mention it at all. They'll talk about, he had a rally or he said this thing on Truth Social. Let's show that. And they just ignore it. They just ignore a lot of it. They ignored the E.G. Carroll case completely. They act like it didn't happen. New York State basically, he'll appeal, of course, but New York State basically said, you're not allowed to do business here anymore. We're going to shut you down completely for fraud. Fox didn't mention that at all. It didn't even happen. Fox just didn't even mention it. And I'm going, that was a huge story. So that's kind of how they deal with it. They just are very selective about what they report on. And they didn't even report on any of his legal scandals until really they ignored all of them until the Mar-a-Lago search. And then they finally were like, right. Yeah.
Well, because it's dramatic enough to make good television, isn't it? Because, he called it a raid. It wasn't a raid. It was a warranted search that, he was given, it was in agreement with his lawyers who were present and all this kind of stuff. And it was done at night, so it didn't cause any trouble. The FBI's version of it is obviously very different to Donald Trump's version, who kind of rewrites history and then presents it as this raid on his rights. But just thinking about, just going back to authoritarianism and what you were saying about keeping score, Donald Trump now is very much directing the MAGA Republicans in Congress with his back channels via Marjorie Taylor Greene and Elise Stefanik and people that he has these relationships with. because, he's probably not on speaking terms with quite a lot of them now because he's had all sorts of, interactions. But via his back channels, he basically has called for Joe Biden to be impeached. Now, there isn't a reason to impeach Joe Biden because he hasn't done anything wrong. And that is pretty obvious because they've been investigating him for 2 years and they still haven't found anything. But that's not going to stop them impeaching him. And it's almost like Donald Trump has gone, well, I had 2 impeachments and 4 indictments.
Yeah.
So he needs to have an impeachment or 2 impeachments and indictments because then it's even. And I mean, it's as simple as that, isn't it? It is retribution. It is simply just getting back and wanting to even the scorecard a little bit.
Yeah, and they don't have the votes for an actual impeachment trial. They don't.
Right.
And they know they don't. The inquiry is just sort of a waste of time because they won't be able to get votes to go to a full trial. They just don't have them.
But people don't know the difference between an impeachment trial and an impeachment investigation, do they? I mean, that really is the fundamental thing. When it's on television and there's people sitting behind desks and they're all, and it looks official. And that's why I noticed that James Comer is trying to make it, he's being quite diligent about use of language so it looks like a courtroom when it's not a courtroom. This is all performative and done on purpose in order to give Fox viewers the sense that Biden is finally being taken down.
Yeah, and over nothing, over absolutely nothing. And the Democrats on the committee are trying valiantly to push back. I mean, it was Moskowitz who had the whiteboard where he held up and he literally did exactly what you're saying. He goes, look how many impeachments, look how many indictments. Oh, look at Biden, 0 and 0. Ha. And he was just whipping out all these things. And AOC called them out for doctoring evidence. And that wonderful woman from Texas, I can't remember her name. Oh, she's amazing. The black congresswoman from Texas was just fierce. And I just sat back going, oh, she's amazing. So they're trying. And the rest of the media, I mean, if you asked your average American, what do you think of it? They would just shrug. I don't think people care. They're much more concerned about the government shutdown that's coming. Or they're much more concerned about inflation, or they're much more concerned about maybe what's going on internationally with the war in Ukraine and other things. Well,
because there's a whole world out there, isn't there? And,
whole world.
And that's why, just going back to, it was Jasmine Crockett who you mentioned.
Oh, that's who it is. Yes. Sorry, I forgot her name.
Would Fox put Jasmine Crockett on screen? Like, would they show, because she took them down in a way that I have never seen. Her use of language, her energy, and then she was like, I will yield at the end. And it was like, it was so beautiful. I was just like, amazing. Yes. And that kind of stuff is never going to be seen by Republicans, is it? They're not watching C-SPAN live. They're just watching the cable news channels.
What they did that was very manipulative is Hannity did this last night. He showed clips of that incident and he showed clips of AOC and Crockett, and they cut the sound and they were minimized. So they're like, look at this impeachment inquiry. And then they went over this bogus evidence. It's not actually evidence of anything. And he was like pushing that really hard, just repeating it a lot. Hannity's big on repetition. And then at certain parts of the screen, and they said, oh, and look at the Democrats. And they had no sound. So you just see AOC like, and then you see a Crockett just going, but you don't hear what they're saying. You can't.
But this is the equivalent of state TV in China or in Russia, muting audio and being, having a very kind of narrow and controlled handle on the output. And yet we talk about America being free, and we talk about, being the greatest country in the world, and yet people can't get health care. Can't get their meds, can't get prescriptions, all these things that are going on. No one really talks about them, but everyone's suffering in silence. And the biggest news channel is purposely silencing the political discourse in the favor of one party and not another. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is no different to Russian state media, is it?
It's not. And it's very much propaganda. I get frustrated when people hesitate to call it that, and they'll say, oh, it's not that bad, or blah, 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 blah. And they make excuses for the network. And I'm like, have you actually sat down and watched it? Like, really watched it? It's a bunch of nonsense. The other thing that they do, I talked about this when I was in Texas too. I said, one of the things that's kind of amazing is like MSNBC, like if you say, oh, it's partisan, okay, I think they're pretty clear that they are. But one thing that you'll see on Fox that's just galling is, especially during the midterms, they'll look right into the camera and go, we have to win. Here's the Republican candidate. We're going to just talk about this Republican candidate for an hour. We've got to win. And I'm like, who's we? You know, like they don't even pretend that they're not openly shilling for the Republican Party. Yeah. And you don't see that on MSNBC. You don't see an anchor going, the Democrats have to win. Like you don't see it as blatant like that. Yeah. And the other thing that they do that's kind of amazing is that they'll have like it's infuriating to watch. Like up in the lead up to the midterms, Hannity would have town halls where he'd just have one candidate on and he'd just praise them the whole time. And I'm like, how is this a town hall? Like, this is not what it's supposed to be. And then they'll call it a town hall and they don't actually let the audience ask any questions. And I'm like, well, then this is not a town hall. This is an interview. Just call it an interview. And he's notorious for that. And then Hannity will do leading questions where he'll be like, with Trump, he'll be like, you're so amazing. Let me tell you how much amazing you are. And this is what you did. 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 Answer. Yeah. So, of course, Trump's going to be like, thank you. You know, it's like,
well, Hannity knows how dumb Trump is and knows that he needs to electioneer for him.
Yes.
Because Trump will just talk about whales and windmills and go off on tangents all the time.
The Panama Canal.
the Panama Canal, yeah.
The Tucker Carlson interview was very amusing to watch because Tucker did not have control over him. Because I think Tucker doesn't like him, but he knew, I need the ratings. So he thought, I need the viewers. I'll get Trump on. And he didn't control Trump. And Trump talked about water pressure for an extended period of time and the Panama Canal.
I actually made a video about that Panama Canal sequence because where I talked about the Panama Canal correctly, because he kept saying that it had been given away for $1. Why would we sell it for $1? And it's like, that's not the point of the Panama Canal. It's not a business. This enables free trade from the West through to the East. It's like no concept. Or, it's like I said on the video, it's like he watched a documentary late one night, like half a documentary, like he was in bed channel flicking and eating snacks. And he came across half a Panama Canal documentary and he watched some of it while he was falling asleep and then decided that he was an expert and spent the whole next day talking about it. But he only really remembered this one detail about selling it for $1.
He got everything wrong.
Amazing.
He got a number of deaths wrong. He kept saying everything wrong. And I'm like, do you understand that Panama is a sovereign nation?
Yeah. No concept.
And they were nice enough to let us build that through their country. Do you understand how that works? That
he says the Chinese have it now. So, look what's happened. But, the problem with Trump being amusing and annoyingly amusing by nature of his stupidity is that it is a cover for the darkness and for the far-right authoritarianism that Joe Biden was talking about in his speech this week. Because, Trump is such a clown. He's just an idiot.
No, he's an idiot.
And I was thinking about, Stalin or Hitler or people through history. Was Hitler an idiot? I don't think he was an idiot. I think he was more calculated and but he also was a populist and managed to, convert regular Germans into Nazis. But Donald Trump, where they differ and why people struggle to kind of label Trump a fascist is because of this demeanor of the Panama Canal shtick. That's the reason why it's so hard, because he is so dumb. And yet he is being used as a like an empty vessel, as a mark to push these policies, just because the people telling him to, the Millers and the Bannons and those who are on the far right, they compliment him. Mm-hmm. He likes that, and so he says whatever it is that they want him to say.
Well, that's that's it.
That is my fear, is that really Trump's stupidity is the porthole to the fall of democracy in the West.
Yeah, I think there's been so much damage just from the one term that we're still pulling ourselves out of.
Right.
That I go back and forth. Like I laugh at him and then I'm terrified. And then I laugh at him and I'm terrified. It goes back and forth because I do think he's a complete buffoon. He's an idiot. He's not bright. He's so easily manipulated. It's terrifying how easily manipulated he is. That he will go along with anything if the right person comes in the room and talks to him and flatters him enough. But at the same time, I am terrified because people will follow him right off a cliff. They don't even know. Like they don't. And he taps into, he's basically the one skill he has is he's like a P.T. Barnum. He's a huckster. He's a salesman. And that's it. That's the only skill he has. And it's scary how I've seen the same pattern in the far right, because when I researched the Proud Boys, there's a lot of overlap with other far right individuals. And it doesn't take much. If you have charisma, if you know how to sell something and you push hate, unfortunately, you can get a following. You can get this whole crowd around you. You can make money. You can gain power, fame, influence. And Trump is the epitome of that. And he's kind of the, people who don't want to sit and think and use critical thinking. They just want to consume candy, which is basically Fox News, rage candy. They just want to eat rage candy all day and pat themselves on the back and say, "Oh, I'm not stupid like those liberals, and I'm not this like those woke people. I'm better, and things are going well. But yet I'm oppressed. I'm oppressed because it's something they push very hard to, like older white America that's actually doing pretty good, but they push the idea that they're doing terribly and that if they just, the other thing is, like you said earlier, like if the United States economy has bounced back kind of miraculously. And if you compare us to Europe right now, we're doing much better. In the UK, we're doing much better. Our inflation's much lower. Our kind of like poor Germany is in a recession right now. Like Germany is in recession, which
even China is having huge problems at the moment.
Huge problems.
Yeah.
Economically. Yes, that's true. With their real estate and debt, and their demographics are all screwed up. They have a lot of unemployment. They have too many boys. They have too many men because of the one-child policy. Caused all kinds of problems. China's having a lot of problems. And, here we are, like people are, I understand people are feeling pain and I don't want to negate that. But honestly, if you just have to look outward, you'd understand it's not that bad. We're going to get through this. And I think we're doing better than, the fact that inflation was like 9% and now it's in the 3s. I don't know what the exact number is right now. But
Trump is lying to people because he doesn't have the answers. He only intends to enrich himself and the top 1%. That is his plan all along.
Yeah.
And if people haven't worked out yet that he's lying to them and that actually poor or working class or even middle class families are better off under Joe Biden's economic plan, Bidenomics, than Donald Trump's, even if it's just down to the economy, because as invariably it is, that those poor, dispossessed people that are following Donald Trump as a leader, as this kind of Jesus character, they will be worse off under him than under Joe Biden. And yet the cult is so strong that they're not even voting Republican, they're voting Trump.
Yeah.
And that is the greatest danger, I guess. We have to finish, but I'm so pleased to talk to you again. And I'm so thrilled that you're still able to keep decoding Fox News so that we don't have to. And please do continue to do that amazing job. And we'll talk again, I hope, at some point.
Thank you.
My thanks to Juliet Jeske. I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to catch Uncovered, my show with Ron Filipkowski, on Wednesdays, and support me and independent journalism on Patreon at patreon.com/5minutenews. Join me next week with a brand new special guest and more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.